My name is Corey Brune. I've been with Delphix for 6.5 years, 7 years now. Principal engineer, I've held roles from engineer, so I actually did development work, solution architecture, pre-sales, almost everything. So what we'll talk about today is how we can accelerate CI/CD processes in our environments, right? So just a show of hands real quick. How many DBAs do we have in here? Okay. Sysadmins, infrastructure? Okay. Call out some roles. What is everybody else doing?
SRE.
Perfect. What?
Data engineer.
Nice, nice. Data scientists? Yeah. Developers, QA? Nice. We definitely will go through a lot of that today, too. I like to keep it very open, so if you have questions, if you want to dive deeper into something, please let me know. Just we'll stop, talk about it, whatever we need to do. Okay. So a lot of the customers that we talk through, a lot of them really tend to be on the left-hand side, right? So we talk about waterfalls, so we're doing weekly releases, we're doing monthly releases, sometimes biannual releases, and oftentimes we'll see pockets of DevOps, right? Where we'll see weekly releases, so every day we'll go through. It's less common, but we do see some CI/CD, so deployment on demand. I go through, do git commit, git push, goes through, pipeline, automatically deploys. Again, those are very rare, and again, mostly in pockets of places, not typically the entire enterprise. QA, dev, how's it like at your organization? Is it more on the left-hand side, center? More left, yeah. And again, that's very common, right? Because there's a lot of blockages that we have there. And also, from a people process perspective, right? We have to go through and update our CRM, how we have approvals to go through. It takes a lot of time to do that, right? As well as some other topics that we'll get to in a couple slides. So really, when we're looking at automation, data is really the blocker, right? Because we typically have large databases, 15, 20 terabytes of data. How do we copy that downstream? And how do we do that securely? So typically we'll have one database, maybe 2 or 3 databases that are shared among all the tests, all the devs, right? Well, that leads to resource sharing, which means that, I can't, as a developer, I can't go out and say, add new constraints. I can't add new columns because I have to wait and coordinate my time with other groups, right? So resource stacking is really difficult. And then we have the low quality of data, which tends to do what we call shift right instead of shift left, where we see defects higher in the stack versus lower in the stack, meaning more into dev, more into QA, and we really see these data-related defects more into prod and integration. Any questions so far? This is pretty standard, right? Okay. So talking about ephemeral data. Well, really, ephemeral environments in general, especially if we're in the cloud, right? We want the cloud to work for us, not for us to work for the cloud. So what we want to do is have environments spun up and then spin them down as soon as we're finished, including the database, right? So what we want to do is be able to spin these up, do whatever transactions we have to, do our tests, our development, unit test, integrations, whatever, and then spin them back down. That way, we can make the most out of the cloud resources and really minimize the impact of the cost. So data for CI/CD, it's critical, right? We have to be able to, inside of one pipeline, we have to be able to spin up the data, test it, and then throw it away within minutes. If we're taking longer than that, if we're taking hours, if we're taking days, that really goes outside of a CI pipeline, right? And then quality of releases. So in order to really do CD, continuous delivery, we have to have complete trust in our database or in our data. So we can go through and do our pushes. We can make sure that it's tested correctly, and there's no bugs, no defects. Because otherwise, we're going to have crashes, we'll have data-related defects, customers are going to complain, we'll have lots of outages, SRE is going to climb all over us, we'll have lots of problems if that's not done, right? Any questions over CI/CD or CD? Okay. So data is really that last frontier, right? We have everything else pretty much automated in CI/CD. We have any instances that we want. We can spin up Terraform. We can spin up application servers with Chef, Puppet, Ansible. We can go through and configure the application servers, configure the database servers. We can add patches, delete patches, whatever it is that we need to do. But that last bastion that we have is data. How do we come in and add a database that's 15 terabytes, that's secure, and also how do we do it within minutes? Because we have to fit inside of that CI pipeline. So that adds the complexity, right? If anybody's using microservices, microservices is fantastic, but it adds a huge amount of complexity, especially when we get down to test. Because in test, we have to make sure, especially in integration, we have to make sure that the release that we have from that service matches the database that we have, right? So if microservice is working on, say, 1.2, and they want to release 1.1, we need to make sure that data stacks up. And then to add to this complexity, we also have to make sure the data is secure and consistent, right? So we can't just go out and do update column X with Corey Brune, right? That's not going to work in test. It's going to destroy your tests, or even worse, you'll have to greenlight the tests, pass it, and get into prod, or sometimes you'll have to chase false positives, right? So a test comes back, says that there's a defect. It's really not. It's because the data is bad. Has anybody worked with Dora or heard of Dora? Nice. Dora? Okay. So Dora is a set of metrics that was designed by a group of people 4 or 5 years ago. And basically what they wanted to see is, what is the best metric to use in software delivery? How can we make software delivery faster? How can we make it more efficient? And in order to do this, they interviewed, I think it was like 35,000 people, ranging from developers to SRE, data engineers, and they basically came up with 3 different categories: high, medium, and low. And depending on where you fall in this, depends on really how fast you are able to deploy fast, right? So deployment frequency, how fast you're deploying, lead time for changes. So once a developer hits git commit or git push, how long does it take that change to get into production? So all these measurements are pretty much a standard now in most DevOps organizations, some software organizations, where instead of counting like lines of code or number of defects found or anything like that, the metrics are a little bit more clear on how can I make my software releases faster? How can I make it more consistent? So in our own organization or with our own customers, we went out and asked what their feelings are, right? As far as what are the best practices for their TDM. First, obviously paramount, we have to have data fast. Otherwise, we're not going to have a CI pipeline. The other part of that is we have to destroy that data as soon as we're finished with it. So spin it up, test, whatever we need to do, destroy it. All, again, in minutes and all automated. So me as a developer, I don't have to do anything else other than git commit. The next thing is sensitive data. We have to be able to, whenever we get data refreshed to lower environments, that data is desensitized, or sensitized. It's masked and secured. So there's no way that somebody can go into your lower environments, find that data, and be able to unmask it, look at that data somehow, and get whatever information that they need to. So make sure that lower environment data is masked, and it's masked consistently. Meaning that if I have 10 different databases that support an application, that the values are all masked consistently. So Corey Brune gets masked to some other name, all the way through all the different databases. What's the next one? Oh, and then obviously we want to test as real as possible, right? So changing values like that is fine. What we don't want to do is, like I said before, change all the values to 1 or change all the values to X, because that doesn't test anything, right? We want to make sure that when our test cases run, that they run as efficiently as possible and as close to real usage as possible. So that really will help bridge that last gap where we had a problem automating the data side. Now we can get past that, and we can get into true CI/CD where we get into, yeah?
You have two things on the previous slide which seem to basically work against each other, because obviously once you pass your data, you've changed all the cardinality and the data density, so you're going to get different query plans. So all of your actual performance testing goes out the window.
Not really. It should. Sorry, go ahead. So it really shouldn't change the cardinality, because what we're doing is just changing the values themselves. We're not changing the execution plans or anything like that. So again,
but it will do, because the execution plan is based on statistics, and statistics change with data.
Yeah, honestly, I'll have to take that one back. I haven't heard that one before, and I haven't seen that in practice. As far as different execution plans, especially going into pre-prod or into non-functional testing like performance tuning. So let me take that one back if you don't mind, and I can chat with you afterwards. But that's good. Thank you. Any other questions? Silent group today. All right. So we talked about that one briefly. Okay, so now talking about the data platform itself. It's really broken up into 2 different products. One is the virtualization side, but both products have APIs. We're an API-first company. We develop the UI afterwards, but really from a test or automation standpoint, we never want to look at a UI. We just want to know what the APIs are, what the functionality is, how to use that, how to put that into my CI pipeline, and how to leverage it, right? We don't care about the UIs that much. So everything that we can do in the UI, we can do in the APIs. And in fact, the APIs, we can do some automation that is not possible in the UI. Multi-cloud, so we can do hybrid cloud, we can do multi-cloud, pretty much any cloud that you need. We can make sure that the data is consistent between all the different clouds, if you're multi-cloud, or from on-prem to the cloud. So compliant, so immutable data. So as soon as we bring that data into Delphix, what we'll do is we'll create a snapshot and keep rolling that snapshot, right? So every day or whatever cadence that we have that we're ingesting that data, we can make sure that those snapshots, nobody can update. So we'll have those snapshots. You can make a copy of that snapshot and update that, but you can't update the snapshot itself. So that really helps in a testing organization, because what we can do is make sure that that state is saved every single time. And then again, because we're API first, it's very easy to integrate us into other tooling systems, like Jenkins, Jira, you name it, right? We have integrations already out of the box, but there's tons of tools out there, so we can very easily integrate into pretty much anything. So we can interchange dev with test here. So really, the time that it takes to create the environment, the time that it takes to refresh or create the data takes the longest amount of time. And that takes us away from what we really want to do, right? So coding, if we're a developer, hands on keyboard, we're not having to wait for anything. We can actually do development work. Substitute that with test cases, right? So I can write test cases if I need to, much faster, and really improve the QX experience, DX experience, versus having to wait on refreshing development environments or creating environments like that. So looking at our architecture, and in here we can change out on-premise with any cloud, right? So we can go through and say, that's Azure, we can go to GCP. So anything like that. Delphix has embedded into it replication technology where we can take data from one place, replicate it to another place. You can do this on-prem, so you can go from data center to data center, network to network, or cloud to cloud. So what we'll do is, in this instance, most of the time our customers will have prod on-prem, and then they'll have dev and test in the cloud. So once that happens, what we'll do is, on-prem, we'll mask that data set. So we'll change that data, update it, make sure it's masked before we send it over the wire to the cloud. So that protects the organization. Even though everything's encrypted, compressed, we still have that extra layer of security going through Delphix. So because we're masking, we're only sending over masked bits. We're not actually sending over production live data. There is a use case for that, though. If we're actually wanting to move from on-prem to cloud, be cloud native, you can use Delphix to transport that data from prod over to the cloud. So very similar to what you're doing here, but with prod data instead. And the power there is you can replicate, and after you replicate the first time, which is going to be a full copy, every time we sync after that will be a partial copy. So whatever the deltas are from the previous sync, that's the only thing that gets transmitted over. So if you're syncing, say, every day or every hour, whatever the cadence is, we only change the data. We only bring over the change bits. Any questions over this? How we do it? Yeah.
Couple of questions. Just to be clear on terminology, by masking, I'm inferring that you're talking about updating some values, so changing John to Dave.
Yeah.
When you do that, like say I've got a sales system and people know that about a third of my sales are to say Microsoft, and we mask Microsoft to SQL bits.
Yeah.
They can clearly infer still that, okay, a third of the volume goes to SQL bits, that's Microsoft, so now we know the numbers. How do you...
So we wouldn't just change the name, we'd also change the bits, right? So we'd also change how much, so... Yeah, we can. It all really depends on what you're wanting to do, right? What is important to you, what values you don't want known. Things like that. If you're bringing in sales from Microsoft, we don't want everybody to know, hey, this is Microsoft, right? So you can change those values as well. Again, we'll have to look at the explain plans on that. But yeah, most definitely, we can change numbers. We can change, the amount of money coming in. We can change VIN numbers. So pretty much any type of data we can change, update, and make sure that it fits within your security regulations. Any questions? Other questions? Did that answer yours?
It does. I guess I've got a question around how do you roll the responsibility of identifying what needs changing and applying.
That's a great, yeah.
Because you feel like you can't centralize it because I'm not close enough to the application base to know what's sensitive or not.
Or the business, right? Yeah. Yeah, so we actually have, and I hadn't talked about this yet, I'm glad you brought it up. We have a capability inside of our masking solution that will identify what we believe to be sensitive data. So it'll go out, profile the entire database, see exactly what it thinks sensitive data is, send you a report. hey, I think these fields are important, these fields are the ones that should be masked. We, as administrators, have the ability to say, yeah, these are great, but these other two, we don't really care about. We don't have to mask those. So we do have something that profiles that data for you, so you don't have to really know that data. And that's actually very common, right? Because developers, all the way through to sysadmins, DBAs, they don't really understand the underlying data, right? We have to have that brought to us either by the business. Yeah, go ahead.
Say, does it include data classification as well? So like restricted, sensitive, confidential?
It doesn't go to that level, no. But what it will do is just basically tell you what type of data it thinks it is and why it needs to be masked and the type of algorithms, but it won't go down to the classification.
And is it just looking at field names, or does it look at the...
It looks at the data as well. Yeah, yeah. So the names and also the data, right? Any other questions? And again, the masking is 100% API driven too. Yeah, yeah.
Do you have any integration with tools like Purview for pulling that data classification?
I can't hear you, I'm sorry.
Sorry, do you have any integration with tools like Purview for pulling out that data?
I haven't heard of that one.
Sorry, I should have reminded you of it.
Oh, sorry. Repeat the question one more time, sorry.
Do you have any integration with tools like Purview for
Purview,
pulling out
yeah.
data classification?
Do we have, the question is, do we have any integrations in tool sets like Purview? I haven't heard of any, but if they are API driven, we can definitely do that. Because again, we interface with pretty much anything, right? If it allows us to integrate with them through APIs or they pull from us through APIs, either way, we can definitely do it. And Delphix is so big that we may have done that, something like that. I just don't know about it, right? So we may have customers out there that are live today with that type of integration. I'm just not aware of it. Any other questions? Awesome. So looking at ephemeral data, is anybody using ephemeral environments today? Nice, yeah. Nutanix? Yeah, nice. Are you also using like Terraform or anything like that? AWS, okay. So using ephemeral data, this thing's gonna get me. Using ephemeral environments, the key obviously is how can we go out and create ephemeral data very quickly? How can we spin up databases within minutes, be able to test against or whatever operations that we want to, and then spin them back down? Completely destroying not only the underlying data, but the infrastructure behind it as well. So Delphix sits in the middle, as you see here. On the left-hand side are our data sources. This can be paths, it can be databases, flat files, binaries, pretty much anything, right? We can interface with pretty much any data that's out there. So we bring that into Delphix. Once it's brought into Delphix, we compress everything. So everything is naturally compressed when it gets into Delphix. And then what we can do is create our data environments after that. And by data environments, I don't just mean like an Oracle server or a SQL server. I mean the entire stack that's required for us to support whatever application. So if we have an application that needs SQL Server, an RDS system, Cassandra, we can put all those together and make sure that they're synced consistently, and that when we bring that data to our development team or our QA team, that all that is refreshed all at the same time.
To be clear, you can create an application environment synced to a point in time, irrespective of the number of different types of servers and systems that make that application environment.
Right, exactly. I'm so horrible at this. So repeating the question one more time so I can repeat it back in here.
So to be clear, you can create an application environment that contains multiple different servers, file stores, or whatever, all synced to a single point in time.
Right. So we can, the question is if we can sync applications, application servers, databases all together with Delphix. And the answer is definitely. We do that, and in fact, that's the best use case, especially in a CI application, because what we can do is make sure that all those data sets or application servers are all synced at the same time. So whenever I go do a refresh, I don't have to contact the SQL Server DBA, the Oracle DBA, and say, hey, I need this refresh at this time, and there's no missing objects, there's no missing data. It's all synced all at the same time. So we're able to do this very easily, and again, everything through API calls. So me as a developer, or me as a QA person, I don't care that Delphix is behind the scenes. I don't care that there's all this other technology that I have at my disposal. All I care about is being able to do my job, right? That I can code more, that I can do testing more. And this really allows me to do that. It gives me the freedom to not care about what happens on the database side. I don't have to create new environments. I don't have to create, new tickets. I don't have to wait for those tickets to be fulfilled. I can do all that operations on my own. So I can refresh on my own. I can do a couple other things which we'll get into. And the other great thing is we do integrations down here. There's several more that we have, just didn't have enough space. So pretty much anything that you have, Chef, Puppet, Ansible, Terraform, you can use us, integrate with us, and then be able to provide, as part of that workflow, be able to provide the data set behind the scenes. And then also ServiceNow, Jenkins, we plug into that. So if we encounter a defect, we can automatically create a save point in time, and then create also a Jira ticket saying, hey, I had this point in time in this data. This is what I was doing to create this defect, and then assign it to dev. So dev can get that copy of data. So really looking at accelerating application flows, right? Some of the great points are on the left-hand side there, where, again, as a developer or QA person, gives me the freedom to do these types of operations. I can provision, refresh my data. I can profile and mask my data as well. So I can go out, reach out to my masking engine, mask the data that I have. Typically that's done beforehand, but we can do that as well. But the more important part is we can actually bookmark. So we can create a save point in time, so we can save the state of the data. Again, across one database, 10 databases, whatever that is to support our application. It saves that point in time. Very important, especially when we talk about QA. Because what QA will do typically is go out, they'll take a refresh of production, secure it, but afterwards we still have to do operations on it to make sure that it's qualified for testing. So we have to do things like update passwords, remove users, update schemas, update certain data. We have to do that in order to fit our testing. So we can do all those operations. We can create a save point, a bookmark, in our data. So as soon as we have that bookmark, we can go out and say, okay, let's run a test iteration. Let's do something to the data, right? Let's try to destroy it, try to break it, whatever that is inside of our test case. As soon as we're finished with that one iteration, we can tell Delphix, hey, Delphix, I want to go back to that save point, because I don't want to have to do another refresh and cleans all my data out. I just want to go back to that save point. So tell Delphix, it rewinds to that point in time, that save point in time. So we're back to that same point, run another test iteration, or however many iterations that we want to. And again, all this is automated. So this isn't something a QA person has to do. This isn't something that a dev has to do. This is all automated behind the scenes. So we're still working, we're still doing all of our jobs. But say we hit a defect. Defect happens. We have that save point in time. We create another save point in time saying, hey, I ran into this defect. Here's a bookmark. I'm going to share this data environment out with dev. So now dev can take that copy of the data environment inside of their data environment, spin it up, and be able to triage much faster, because now the data environments are synced. How QA got to that...
This on the web.
Thank you. So exactly how we got to that point is saved. So we can give that to we can give that to dev. So now dev can take the code that they were using, they can use the exact scenario that QA was using, and find that bug that much faster. So now we don't have to really take a lot of time doing triage work. Well, what's different between these two databases? Why does it work in dev? Why does it not work in QA? Right? All those questions can be very easily answered by just sharing a bookmark, sharing a point in time with development. The other great thing is branching. So just like what we do, we branch code, we can branch data now as well. So this is really important, especially in microservices, even outside of microservices in monolithic applications. We can use branches to match up our data, our code. So if we're working on branch 1, 2, we can branch our data the same manner, say Delphix branch it. That way, when we go to QA, we can make sure that when we go to our build, we also check out the same branch in Delphix. That way, we have our code environment and our data environment completely matched up together. Any questions? Is this cool stuff? Yeah? A little bit of nods? Yeah, okay. All right. So transitioning to ephemeral data. Really looking at cloud costs, right? So if you're in the cloud, is pretty much everybody in the cloud, or do we have on-prem still? How about this? Anybody on-prem? On-prem? Yeah. Okay. All right. So the cost perspective won't really matter as much to you, but the theory still holds true. While we don't care too much about cost because cost is pretty stagnant inside of on-prem, the cost for dev and for test is a little bit higher, right? Because we still, in a static environment, we're typically not refreshing as as quickly. We're not providing that data out to them. So it's a little bit more costly from that perspective, not necessarily a true raw cost from like AWS or Azure. So what we're doing is, before we're testing a little bit, we're waiting for a refresh, we're waiting for some type of data to come in, and then we test again and repeat the cycle, right? And then on the ephemeral side, what we can do is really leverage not only our costs, but we can really leverage our automated processes. So if we want to make sure that everything's automated, that we go from from dev, past that gate, go to QA, past that, go to integration, and then eventually to prod, we can do that much more efficiently using ephemeral environments. Because what we're doing is not only shutting everything down and releasing the resources there, which is vital, but we're also making sure that the test cases themselves will run very much quicker as well. So being able to use these data environments, shut everything down, bring everything back up, especially in an automated fashion, am I in the way here? Will really help enhance development and QA as well. The other thing, too, is we can automatically run test cases. We can do version controls like we were talking about before with branching. And then, obviously, be able to tear everything down. So on-prem, is anybody using ephemeral data right now? Yeah, nice. What about cloud? Is anybody using ephemeral data or ephemeral environments in the cloud? Yeah, all right. Which clouds are you using? Okay, yeah, right on. So this would be vital for you, right, in the cloud, being able to spin things up, which you're pretty much doing right now. What are you doing on the data side?
It's sort of a homebrew version of what you've described, where we basically task the engineering teams with creation and deployment of code in SQL databases that will scramble the data. And then we have an automation process that takes back with the production environment, executes that stored procedure if it exists, and then restores that sanitized copy to an environment.
Nice. Yeah, I'd like to learn a little bit more about that process. It's nice. So yeah, ephemeral environments, especially in the cloud, is just vital because we want to lower the cost as much as possible. And if we're using static environments like what we do on-prem, it's just going to cost so much more money. I have a client right now that they'll spin up an environment. They have a couple servers that are like 128 CPUs, gobs of RAM, like almost 2 terabytes of RAM, and plus all the data behind it. Stand it up. They will test it for about 3 hours, shut it down, and it's like $30 or 30 pounds. Or in pounds, that would be what, $18 or 18 pounds, something like that. So anyway, it's just one use case of using ephemeral environments where it really can help maximize your spend from a dollar perspective. So moving a little bit more into pipelines, really. Looking at this, really we fit mostly in CI. We do transition into into SRE. I'll talk about that here in a minute. We don't do too much with deployment to prod because that's typically handled in an automated fashion. So that's typically handled by Jenkins or GitLab or whatever you're using to deploy. And typically Delphix isn't really used there. There's a couple of special edge cases that I can talk about for deploys, for production. But really where we sit is mostly in the CI realm. So we're able to go out, we're able to really help with integrations. So we can integrate into Jenkins, like I said before, or GitLab, or whatever other CI processes that you're using today. Terraform, so we do have a Terraform provider. So if you're using Terraform now, you can use Terraform with us. You can create databases, you can destroy databases, you can create those bookmarks that we were talking about. Tons of different APIs that you can use with Terraform itself. So you can use Terraform, use the syntax in Terraform, and also leverage the power of Delphix. So unit test integrations. So integrations, again, is very special because at integration, we want to bring all the applications and all the microservices together and test it as one versus in lower QA where we're doing mismatch here and there, making sure that functional tests run fine. Integration, we want to make sure that the entire application stack runs when we go to release. So in those cases, again, we need to make sure that our data environments match up what we have for release. So be that through scripting, making sure that our data branches all match with our code branches. We'll make sure that the integration tests go much faster, much more clean. On the code commit side, so again, we integrate with ServiceNow, Jira. So if we're running a unit test, we can create automatically Jira tickets, create bookmarks, tell Jira, hey, I created this bookmark, assign it to dev, tell them that this is a bookmark, these are tags that I have in whatever that is, right? We can have that automated to where dev can pick up that bookmark very easily, see exactly what the problems are, and then fix it and push it up the stack. So for SRE, we have all these integrations here, plus a few more as well. New Relic, App Dynamics. But SRE is a little bit different in that when we're in SRE, we're not necessarily wanting mass copies of prod, right? What we want is true live production or as close to live production as we can get without really necessarily affecting prod. So we can log in, we can look at the application, but not affect prod. So we can see if there's a defect happening or a customer's running into some issue, we can see that, test it out, and again, not affect prod. This is especially useful going through smoke tests. So smoke tests are generally done in prod. So they'll have their own special users, they'll have maybe their own schemas, but I've seen where this has really gone bad. I myself have seen where we had a smoke test happen. We didn't update some JMS queues, and the JMS queues were actually going to prod, to a different prod system, and we actually shipped out several orders that were fictitious. So in order to back that out, we had to delete everything, including all the orders for that day that were legitimate and not legitimate. That was not a fun conversation to have. So, but that's a great use case for Delphix, though, because now, instead of smoke testing in prod, we can smoke test in a temporary environment where we're not affecting prod. We can actually use prod users and make sure that, whatever smoke test that we have to go through to make sure that the application, that the release is sane, we can make sure that that's good and effective. Any questions over SRE, use cases. Okay, all right. Let's see here. Okay. And that's my last slide. So again, my name's Corey Brune. We have quite a bit of integrations with other applications, third-party tools, especially when we're talking about dev, test. We help, especially in the DBA realm, where we can help automate a lot of the things that take you away from your day-to-day job, right? Like doing data refreshes. Nobody likes doing them. We can help automate that. We can help give that power over to other groups. So your dev, your QA personnel can actually do that on their own. You don't have to waste cycles. You can spend more time in prod. You can spend more time in QA. I'm sorry, more time in doing development work and helping out with stored procedures or performance tuning or site reliability, what have you, right? Yeah.
What's the licensing cost?
Licensing, we don't have any salespeople. Is Paul in the room? Okay. Yeah, I don't. We'll have to talk to Paul. He's downstairs. He's on the pre-sales side. I'm technically in pre-sales, but I'm more on the innovation side, so I don't get into pricing at all, unfortunately. So.
If we look on your website, there must be this is the base cost. Sure, you could say that.
Yeah.
I don't know.
If you come to our booth, we can answer all your questions about pricing. Probably the best.
Yeah, I do know this, that the masking product is different than the virtualization product, but I can't even give you a rough order of magnitude, unfortunately. Quite honestly, I am purposefully ignorant of those prices. So because that's not my area of expertise, right? When it gets to sales and even pre-sales, that's where I kind of go away from that, right? So I apologize about that, but again, Paul definitely can help you downstairs, or Pontus, or really any of the guys downstairs, they can definitely help you. So we have a booth downstairs. If you'd like to dive into any of these subjects a little bit more deeper, understand how we do masking, understand how we do virtualization, what other technologies we support, how we can work better in your environment, we have a booth downstairs. By all means, please stop downstairs and come see us. Thank you.